Hey guys, Buster here. I won't waste your time with an overly long intro. I think the first Sonic game is kinda overrated. Now before you start sending me death threats in the comment section, please just listen to my reasons first. I want to talk about the fact that whenever people talk about this game, they kinda just forget the fact the game has a lot of game design flaws, and before you say, Buster, it's the first Sonic game, they were just experimenting with everything. Yeah, I do understand your point there. That doesn't make it any less susceptible to criticism, and I don't want this video to be just blatant hate, since I want to talk about the positive parts of this game as well. Also, we will only be talking about the original Genesis version. With that out of the way, let's get into this. Well, I guess there's no better place to start than Green Hill Zone. This zone introduces you to all the most important mechanics, which of course are the badniks, monders, rings, collapsing platforms, and most importantly, Sonic's speed and physics. This level feels great to go through and play, and the zone itself is beautiful. This level truly demonstrates Sonic's potential in the best way possible. The boss battle against Eggman here is, well, piss easy since you just gotta jump at him a few times to avoid his wrecking ball. But like I said earlier, it's first zone, so it's hard to be critical of it. Also, before we go to Marble Zone, I have to mention something I like to call the Sonic the Hedgehog cycle. How most people play Sonic 1 is that they easily breeze through Green Hill Zone, but after getting game over in Marble Zone, they shut off the console only to not touch the game for 2 months and the cycle repeats. So, here's Marble Zone, and it's truly one of the levels of all time. The zone throws out the speed part of Sonic and focuses on more slow and precise platforming, which by itself isn't much of an issue until you realize how it's executed. Some highlights of these levels are slowly waiting for the spike rush to come down so you can jump on top of it, slowly having to stand on this cube and make jumps. This level has tons of these sections and they stretch out for way longer than they should. There are also occasionally dead ends, and it makes it a painful and fun level to play through. I don't mind slow-paced gameplay, but this is not how you do it. Also, this enemy can go itself. The boss in this zone is arguably just as easy as the first zone. You have to avoid the flames by jumping between the 2 blocks while trying to hit him. Nothing offensive in the game design department. Next, we got Spring Yard Zone, and this one is kind of fun with its gimmicks. It reminds me of Casino Night Zone with a lot of springs and all these bumpers. However, I do think this level looks the least interesting of them all. It just feels like a random mismatch of objects, and at times I feel like I'm just running around aimlessly. There are also a few slow sections where you go down these platforms, though it's not nearly as bad as it was in Marble Zone. The boss fight is also slow paced, but this one I'm okay with since it was an alright idea. You gotta wait for Eggman to strike the ground and take a piece away from it and hit him while at it, while also making sure you don't fall. Now we have Marble Zone, and this is by far the least fun zone in the entire game. Here's how to create Labyrinth Zone in less than 1 minute. Take Marble Zone, but fill it to the brim with water, have Sonic speed, and also add a lot of more annoying obstacles. The water wouldn't be too annoying, but you move super slow and cannot swim. And you have a breath meter you need to fill by collecting air bubbles. Also, I might as well get this out of the way. The journey music probably gave some kids nightmares. There are a lot of places where there's little indication of where to go, and in some parts you will just slowly die because you have no idea what you're doing, as well as a lot of blind jumps. I do think this zone looks nice, but with the incredibly frustrating gameplay, it's very hard to actually sit down and enjoy. Also, the third zone has this infinite waterfall section where you have to jump at a specific point to activate a switch, so you can get out that way. How is the average 6-year-old supposed to figure this out? Are they just expecting you to spam the A button? Which is fair, I'm sure most people went into the zone thinking if they could just spam A, they could swim. The boss is also very easy. You just have to chase Eggman up this platforming section, and you don't even have to hit him once. So here we have Starlight Zone, and here's another fun one. This one is kind of gimmicky. There's these fans that push you, but there's also these seesaws, and there's also these platforms you have to manually interact with so they move. This level can be really annoying with how the swing shots you into some parts, and the amount of blind jumps you have to take. This is a big issue when you can just fall into the infinite void, which makes rings almost meaningless, especially when put in context how late we are in the game. I honestly don't know how to describe the look or feel of the level. It kind of reminds me of a roller coaster that hasn't been fully constructed yet. The boss battle in this level was honestly kind of fun. You had to use these seesaws and wait for bombs to land on them so you can throw them back at Eggman. I wish more of the bosses took the level's gimmicks into effects like this. Lastly, we have Scrap Rain Zone, which gives me a heavy mechanical and science feel, however at the cost of some parts being annoying. Most of the obstacles in this zone are constantly spin, which makes them hard to navigate, and there are also these disappearing blocks. Are there any Mega Man fans watching this video? Most of the zone has a lot of gotcha moments. If you are accidentally going at a pace it doesn't want you to be at, which is something that is never obvious. Especially since this zone continues with the tradition of blind drops and jumps. Oh, and the final zone is a water stage for some reason. And this time it's even more annoying due to how limited the air bubbles are. Also, I'm pretty sure the Iron Spike Ball at the end's sole purpose is to drain you with your rings. To end this game off, there was one final boss battle, where you have to avoid these energy pellets and hit Eggman while avoid being crushed by these pistons. This is a completely fine boss, but I wish there was a little hint of where Eggman could come from, instead of it just being random. So that was Sonic... Wait, hold on. Oh, I forgot about you. If you collect 50 rings and hold on to them by the end of the stage, you get access to a special stage, and I have no idea what I'm looking at. These are fever dreams. I don't think these are nearly as bad as people say they are, but it's still not... great. There's a lot of memorization, and most of it is just you getting thrown around with little control over yourself. Beating one of these gets you a Chaos Emerald, and you can get all 6 of them to get an alternative ending. I could look up on Google. Yeah, Supersonic was not a thing when this game released, but it's kind of funny because there's literally a bullet point on the back that says, it's Supersonic. So that was Sonic 1. It definitely hasn't aged the greatest, and while do suggest playing it, please, either play the mobile ports or on some sort of collection. You will need that save state functionality if you want to keep your sanity. Eventually I'll be checking out the other classic Sonic games, but those are for another day. Hey guys, Buster here. Cancel games are nothing new. Hundreds of games are teased each and every year, and eventually end up not happening. However, I argue there is no cancelled game with such an infamous backstory like Sonic X-Treme. That can be confused with Sonic.exe, which was also cancelled, but it's not nearly as interesting story-wise. The Sonic X-Treme tale is an incredible story, full of tight deadlines, people risking their lives, and inevitable failure as a result of it all, with Sega being their own worst enemy. The development started in late 1994, with a designer and CGI artist game named Chris Sen and a few other Sega employees, doing designs for what was planned to be an exclusive Sonic game for the ill-fated add-on, the Sega 32X. However, the funny thing is that at the time, the add-on wasn't even released, and they didn't even really know what it was capable of. Eventually, they started developing the game itself, and it was called Sonic Mars. However, suddenly Osaka, who was one of the designers for this game, redesigned due to them not getting along with the executive producer named Dean Lester, and also talked about how the office was a politically unhealthy environment. Funny enough, Dean would also be resigned shortly after, with those 2 employees being replaced and making changes. Eventually, due to the 30X underperforming, the development was later shifted to be located on the Sega Saturn, which, funny enough, at the time was also not doing too well, which caused the team a few weeks of development because of having to force it to work with the Sega Saturn. Now, just to set the scene of how truly bad the development was, Yuji Naka, who worked at Sega at the time, looked at the state of the development in the strict October 1996 deadline and said, "Good luck." At this point, the development was split into 2 teams, one team taking care of the boss fights and the other taking care of the main levels. And weirdly, they were developing the game using different engines. After a few fights between developers and some other minor troubles trying to get Sonic's 2D play space into a 3D space, in March 1996, some of STS's Japanese workers would try and see how development was going in the American department. Safe to say, they were not impressed. Frame rates were low, with one developer was angry to the point where they started cussing them out. Yeah, that's the appropriate way to react. To add insult to injury, Sen tried to show them the latest version of PC build, which is apparently a lot more polished. However, they left before he could do so. However, despite all this, one of the visitors was impressed by the use of Coffin's boss engine, and therefore requested that the game should restart development to take advantage of it. Also, Chris Coffin is a programmer for the game, I probably should have mentioned earlier. Coffin's team would move into a small SCI location with 4 artists, 2 programmers, a contractor, and 3 designers, and they were all working for around 16 to 20 hours per day, with some of them moving directly into the office. If that is not dedication, I don't know what is. But the worst part still hasn't come in yet. In April, Bernie Stoller would approach SCI and give the source code for Nights into Dreams, which was another Saturn game made by Sonic Team earlier in the year, to try and speed up the development process. However, a few weeks later, he requested they stop using the engine due to Naka allegedly threatening to leave Sega if it were used. Now, this was never elaborated in terms of why, but later on in 2022, Naka said this was not true because the games were made in 2 different engines, and they invented the story to excuse the game's failure. Whether or not this story is true, the fact was the development was in a very rough spot. Now, in E3 1996, there was a playable demo of Sonic X-Treme, however, unfortunately at the expense of the developers' well-being, with Coffin ironically getting a severe case of walking pneumonia, and Sen being ill to the point where he was told he had 6 months to live, though he would end up surviving. Due to how both of these teams were in a very bad state, The game would be delayed to early 1997 before eventually getting cancelled. However, Sega made up for this with 3 3D Sonic games. Try saying that 10 times fast. Sonic 3D Blast, which was just a port of a Genesis game. Sonic R, which is a very jank racing game, which somehow had fairly decent reviews back in the day. And lastly, Sonic Jam, which was just a compilation of the first 4 classic Sonic games. Now, none of these games are terrible, but when you put into context some of Nintendo's exclusives, yeah, I probably don't need to explain why this is an issue. Not much later after X-Treme's cancellation, SCI would be shut down, and in my research there was apparently supposed to be a live-action animated film based on Sonic X-Treme. I also guess while I'm at it, I should talk about my opinions on the game via the prototypes, and if I think this game would ever be good if it was released. And honestly, I'm kinda mixed about it. Now granted, all these prototypes were tons of bugs and not much to do, but honestly I feel like Sonic is just not very comfortable in this environment they put him in. Not that all 3D Sonic games are bad. I did enjoy my time with Frontiers and Generations. I just think it's the claustrophobic areas and some of these extreme areas that don't feel well to explore. Hey guys, Buster here. Do you remember that one Sonic game where you had to do math problems in order to 100% everything? I'll give you 3 seconds to guess what I'm talking about. Okay, you and I both know that isn't what I'm talking about. I'll give you one more chance. That's more like it. Sonic Schoolhouse was this weird PC game that was released for the PC on October 18th, 1996. It was planned to be its own series of spin-off educational games, however that never happened. Honestly, you could probably make an entire series based on the educational Sonic games alone, especially the ones released for the Sega Pico. So, we boot up the game and...
I'm Sonic. Click on me for help.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect these Sonic to sound like, but it sure as hell wasn't this. Well, here we just enter a name and choose which animal we want to be. And funny enough, there are no hedgehogs or any of the Mobius species, which kind of surprises me. So, we spawn into the map, and this is surreal. The goal of this game is that there are 3 lessons: math, English, and spelling, as well as 2 other side ones I will get to later. You can click on Sonic for help, and while it does look like a normal boring Schoolhouse, it still has that Sonic charm to it, with tons of references to the Genesis games and Sonic cartoons at the time. The gameplay itself consists of just picking up overly dead inside looking objects and putting them on these chalkboards, which can bring up quite a challenge. For ages 5 and lower, that is. Yeah, the gameplay is stupid simple, but like I said, it was intended for people 5 and under. Now me personally, I believe a better game to introduce to kids is one of the ones currently on the screen, but it's still kinda cool, and I imagine if I was 5 years old I would probably not mind too much. Also, there are occasional items. You can collect Sonics, school buses, and keys. Oh, yeah, when you finish in the level, Sonic has a little charming animation congratulating you. Eggman also roams around and can steal your items. The school buses lead you on a field trip where— Whoa, Sonic, slow down! These lead you to videos about animals, which I totally paid attention to. The Sonics are keys to the backyard where you can play 2 mini-games. This memory game one, which I didn't realize was memory until after I left. And there is this one where you have to collect 5 rings as fast as possible while these magnets try to stop you, which is the closest thing to an actual Sonic game in this entire package. There are also keys which just allow you to skip a problem, and I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel for facts here, honestly. The animal videos last nearly twice as long as the game. Wait, you can play this with 2 people? I don't have people to play this game with, but the footage you're seeing on screen explains it enough. Sonic Schoolhouse is a game that can rip to absolute shreds critically, but for what it's supposed to be, I don't know, I guess it got the job done. But that's really all I can say. It's a very nothing game. Now granted, if I was in the age group, maybe I would enjoy this a lot more. But as a 15-year-old currently attending high school, I'm sure if I brought this there, I would start getting bullied relentlessly. There was a scrap clock character. I'll stop dragging this video's length out. Hey guys, Buster here. When I say the words Sonic's mobile games, what do you think of? Now, if I had to guess, you're probably thinking of the Christian Whitehead ports of Sonic 1 and 2 for mobile, or you're possibly thinking of Sonic vs. Speed Battle or Sonic Dash. However, believe it or not, the first Sonic mobile games weren't on your iPhone. In fact, the iPhone didn't even exist when these were made. I introduce you to the Sonic Cafe service. Now, what is the Sonic Cafe, I hear you say? And no, it's not that speed cafe that recently opened in East Village. Also, how did I only find out about this? And how did I get there? The Sonic Cafe was a mobile service that was active from the 26th of January 2001 all the way to the 1st of December 2007. How it works is that you pay 315 yen a month, with that roughly being $2 US, and you would get access to Sega's large variety of mobile games, with around 37 games. However, there were some caveats. Firstly, the service was only available in Japan. A select few of those games came to North America and Europe, but those were few and far between. And those said games that didn't make it were put under the Sega mobile service, not the Sonic Cafe service. Secondly, the service was only available on certain phones, mainly ones made by iMode, EzWeb, and Vodafone phones. Editor's note here. Try saying Vodafone phones 10 times quickly. Thirdly, all these games were digital only. Now, why is that bad? Aren't most games nowadays digital? Well, yes. The main issue, however, is the fact that ever since the service shut down in 2007, a good chunk of these games have become lost media. But overall, $2 a month for a bunch of mobile games, I'll take it. Now, let's check out some games that are on the service. Given how many are actually released and how many are lost, I cannot play all these. So, I picked around 4 of them that I thought sounded cool. Firstly, we have a Sonic the Hedgehog 1 port. Now, in my last video, I said this. Now, I cannot find any ROM files for this version online. It very much seems like these games are lost media. And I'm happy to say that I was wrong. Now, I'm not sure if I'm about to say where I got the ROMs from because of the legalities a bit, but I did find ROMs of the Sonic 1 port. Now, this was one of the few games that were actually released in North America and Europe instead of just Japan. This game was actually split into 2 ports, 3 zones each. The first difference I noticed is the audio. The music was reworked similar to the GBA version. And it's still ear bleeding, and the sound effects are nearly non-existent. There are no special stages. You just jump directly into the ring and get the emerald just like that. The spike bug! One issue I could not get past was the controls. Now the controls themselves are fine with you using the pad to move and the 9 button to jump. But rather on the unresponsiveness of them, I found it hard to make jumps in quick patterns. Not sure if this is an issue with the emulator or the game itself, though. I also feel like mentioning the resolution changes between the first and second parts. But apart from those issues, I'd honestly say this is a bit better than the GBA port. There was also a version of Sonic 2 for smartphones, but since this video isn't supposed to be about ports, I'm going to skip that one. Next up, we have Sonic Racing Kart. Now, this game was in Spanish, so bear with me here as I try and understand this. But from what I understand, we boot the game and we're given a variety of tracks to pick. We are then given a camera angle option, and we go from there. Oh, I feel like mentioning I'm not pressing any button to accelerate. The only controls this game has is the turn left and right. What you're seeing on the screen is basically it. There are 5 tracks, however, all of them are just paint, bucket, green, grass, and I'll be all of them in less than 10 minutes. This game feels lazy even for mobile game standards, and I feel like in 2003 you could do better than this. There weren't even any sound effects for that car for sake. So overall, this game is probably the worst out of everything we will check out today. Speaking of which... Next up, we have Sonic Jump. No, not the one currently available on iOS. I mean the original. What else do you think we've been talking about the last few minutes? I also feel like mentioning that Doodle Jump was released after Sonic Jump. Unlike the others, this game actually has a story. The story is that Sonic gets a call from Tails early in the morning, saying that Eggman has kidnapped him. I also feel like mentioning you get to read the story 2 words of dialogue at a time. The gameplay itself is, well, your average Doodle Jump game. Both of them mix Sonic's mechanics. Don't land on the weak platforms, stick to the strong ones, and collect rings to avoid dying. Also, don't fall off. It's nothing special, however I had a decent amount of fun. I can imagine if I had a phone like this in 2004, I would not mind playing this. Lastly, we have Shadow Shoot. The name sounds really plain, which means this can't be good, right? Well, we get into the game and it starts with Shadow randomly exploding, and Eggman steals the emerald he was holding. The game itself plays kind of like an endless runner. You collect rings and have to avoid the bombs. Though there are dash panels that allow you to go through the bombs and multiply your score. At the end of each level, there is a boss fight. Oh, yeah, did I mention Shadow has a gun? I'll be honest, I could not get past the first level because these sprites are way too difficult on this. But compared to most Sonic mobile games I've played for this video, it's alright. Hey guys, Buster here. Welcome to the 200 subscriber special. And by the time that this video is posted, we're probably at like 205 or something like that. In this video, we'll be covering a bunch of weird Sonic ports. I don't want to cover every single Sonic port because if that's the case, we'll be here for a few hours at the least. Rather, I just want to talk about the ones that I find interesting. I won't go into any specific order or details. Let's just get into this. Also, stick to the end, or alternatively, spam the right side of your phone screen for a special announcement. Now, I should mention that for most of these, I use emulation. Mainly since I am not willing to spend hundreds of dollars on this one video, and you may see some footage from others because of me either struggling to get these working with emulators, or some of these games being lost media. Firstly, let's start with Sega Smash Pack for the Dreamcast. Now, this is a collection of a lot of Sega games, but the one that I am focused on is the port of Sonic 1. Sega! Wow. I'm sure you could tell from that 5-second clip of the title screen that the emulation has something wrong with it. The music sounds horrid. Listen to this. What a banger. Listen to the special stage now. Yeah, this game wants my ears to die. I also feel like mentioning the game constantly looks like it's about to collapse, but I think this might be an emulator issue, since from what I saw from footage on YouTube, it looks fine. Mostly. Now, if you can excuse the sound issue, then this is a mostly fine port, but there are better ways to play this. Now, before we move on to the next port, I feel like mentioning that if you put the CD for this game in your computer, you'll find a message from the developers of the game that basically tells you how to pirate it. I'm pretty sure this is because of how poorly the staff was treated during development. Wow, that's all I can say, really. Moving on to the next game, we have Sonic N for the N-Gage. This is a port of Sonic Advance for the GBA. Now I feel like mentioning that, for the record, the game itself is fine. It was ported over what I think is the best it could have been. Do note some features like the mini Kale Garden are missing though. Now, I don't own an N-Gage myself, obviously. Though, from what I've heard, the game is really uncomfortable to play on the keypad, and I might as well get the elephant out of the room. The aspect ratio and screen crunch is a major issue. It's obvious that these levels were not made with the screen in mind. To put into context on how bad the screen crunch is, the resolution of the N-Gage was 176 by 208 pixels, with the screen size being around 2.1 inches. With the GBA flipping the aspect ratio, it's obvious that the game focused on platforming works better for a horizontal ratio than a vertical one. And the final issue I want to mention was the price. At the time, a GBA of a copy of Sonic Advance was cheaper than an N-Gage alone, and that remains true today. So, overall, not a horrible port, but you're better off just buying a used GBA and a copy of Sonic Advance. Moving on to the next, and one of the worst ones here, we have Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for the Game Boy Advance. You would think that this port would be good because, well, if you paid attention for the last minute, I was talking about Sonic Advance and how that was a good game on the GBA. Wow! This port has so many issues. I will start with the most infamous one, the music. Make sure to put your headphones nice and high for this. As you can tell from that, the music is horrendous. But that's not the only issue. Yet again, the screen crunch is the issue. The sprites are the same resolution as the Genesis version and were not scaled down properly. Next is this the amount of bugs that really should not exist. Look at that hitbox. Sonic hovering is real now. Look at that frame rate drop. If you're like me and already have issues with Marble Zone, just wait till you try doing it on the GBA. I didn't play enough to get the lab room, but I can't imagine it's a very pleasant experience. Now, the funniest part of this game is the fact that nobody even knows who made this port. All it says is that it was made by Sega and Sonic.exe. There are a few theories as to who made this port. My personal theory is that this was made by a group of people at Sonic.exe who had to rush this out for release, and they knew it was such a poor quality product that they didn't even want to be associated with it. Now to rub some salt in the wound, this game was released on the same day as Sonic.exe, which was the same day as Sonic's 15th anniversary. In fact, this game has a lower Metacritic rating than Sonic.exe. Now, I turned 15 a few days ago, but I cannot imagine being treated like this on my birthday. I'm rambling a bit here, so let's move to the next port. Alright, this one is an honorable mention before we get to the last port. Granted, if you are thinking of Sonic on the Go, you're most likely thinking of the Christian Whitehead versions released on mobile in 2013. But those ports had a bit of history before being like they are today. In 2005, released under the Sonic Cafe service, which deserves its own video, there was a version of Sonic 1 and 2 ports released on flip phones. Now, I cannot find any ROM files for this version online. It very much seems like these games are lost media. The only way I can show you any footage of this is clips I found from people that recorded their phone streams with a webcam. If anyone has a ROM file for these, please send them to me. I want to check them out for a video. Now for the final and worst port, we have Sonic Jam for the Tiger Gamecom. If you thought the GBA port was lousy, just look at this. The first issue is that this game does not contain Sonic 1 at all. It only contains Sonic 2, 3, and Knuckles. What a great start. The next issue is that the music is just bad. At least the GBA version attempted to make decent sounding music and failed miserably, but still. Let's say that the Gamecom is a good definition of good music. Next, we have the fact that the physics are completely broken. Sometimes you can't run up a hill or make certain jumps because of how horrible the physics are. And as for the characters, well, Sonic is your average playset, just way slower. Knuckles has no gliding ability whatsoever, and Tails has the flying ability, but it has no cap and you can fly forever. And that's really the only way you can beat this game, if anyone has beaten this game, that is. To show how horrible this was, even for 1998 standards, here is Sonic 1 for the Game Gear. It's obviously not the same as Sonic 1 for the Genesis, but it's still a fun and alright game. This was released in 1991. It's mind-blowing me that this game even exists, honestly. I already talked in the past about how much Sega loves to see fan games and allows them. However, there's another genre of these fan games called ROM hacks. At least I think ROM hacks is the right word. I have no idea. So I installed 5 of these said ROM hacks, and we're going to go through all of them. I should also mention that I'm only going to play modifications of the original games, so stuff like the S Factor and Sonic.exe is out of the question. I feel like those deserve their own standalone videos instead of just a quick mention. Also, no ROM hacks with minimal changes like being able to spin dash or just combining all the games and that's it. Well, with that in mind, let's get into it. So for our first ROM hack, we have Sonic.exe, which I'm not too sure what this is, but given the title, I suppose it's Sonic 2 with more content. Let's get into it. So this game looks normal at first, but then we start collecting some rings and yeah. I don't know what to say. So the mechanics for this game we have our average spin, dashing, and jumping, and you lose rings when you get hit. However, the rings have this other mechanic. The rings have been replaced with onion rings, and if you collect them, Sonic starts to gain weight. Eventually he gains to the point where he cannot move and you die. To lose this weight, you have to walk or run it off, but with the constant placement of rings, it's a bit hard. Most of this game is just spent walking back and forth like this. And don't even bother trying to get Super Sonic. Now, I should mention this hack was made as a parody, it's not meant to be taken seriously. So, looking at this hack from a joking perspective, it is a pretty good joke hack. But if we look at it critically, it's not that great. I know a lot of people on this hack would ask why and what, but honestly I'd rather ask who and how. Who as in, who would spend their time working on this, and how as in, how much time was spent on this ROM hack that we could have used to work on something actually beneficial to society. The second one on the shopping block here is called Sonic Point and Click Edition. As setting it up with Kga, we can see how we have a mouse cursor on the title screen. We can click to start the game, and with our mouse, we get a whole new layer of interactivity. We can grab monitors, make fish fly into the air, keep enemies in place, make Sonic spin dash, freeze the wrecking ball. The list goes on. Honestly, this hack is pretty cool and a neat idea. The only caveat is that it ends after Green Hell Zone. Also, here's a bit of a fun fact. If you really want to, if you have a Sega mouse and a Genesis flash card, you can play this game on real hardware. One of the most known as for it, but you can do it either way things I've ever heard. Overall, a decently cool hack. So let's take a step back and add some smaller changes. We normally have one character in Sonic 1, so let's change it up a bit. Here is Shadow in Sonic 1. He has some custom abilities like being able to spin dash and kick. Here's Amy in Sonic 2. However, she cannot attack enemies, making her feel pretty pointless. Here's Charmy in Sonic 1, and he's the size of the ant on the screen, which I guess makes sense. You can fly around, making the game a breeze. Granted, you don't suck at this game, which I clearly do. On the topic of adding more characters to this game, we have Sonic Classic Heroes, which is a hack that adds the Sonic Heroes mechanic of being able to switch between characters, and adds it to Sonic 1. Each character has their respective abilities, and there are some secret areas you can only access with specific characters. Personally, you're able to change between either Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Personally, I stuck to Tails due to his fine ability being overpowered as all hell. It's hilarious that this game was not made for anyone else apart from Sonic's playset in mind. This hack is also multiplayer, so if you want to play this multiplayer on real hardware, you'll have to get a multi-tap so you can have more than 2 player slots. Overall, that's it for this hack. I think it's honestly the best out of the 5. You're probably looking at this and thinking, this is just Sonic 1? Well, no. An ordinary Sonic ROM hack is a hack that is inspired by Sonic.exe. The idea is that it starts out normal at first, but then the zone becomes the hellish version of the area. And, oh no, it's Sonic.exe. Scary. If you get caught, you die, and you have to break a monitor to get out the hell version of that zone. This one is going to put your knowledge about Sonic 1 to the test, which obviously I don't have. Though honestly, most of my time dying was spent dying the average way. Also, getting a game over does this fun thing. A couple things I need to know is that you cannot beat a level when it is in its hellish state. You only beat the level when he isn't chasing you. That's it for an ordinary Sonic ROM hack. Honestly, I think it's the most well-made of them. Doesn't make it the best, but I could tell there was a lot of effort put here in the right areas. Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most famous figures in all of gaming. While it has been through some rough patches, it has done more good than bad to the gaming industry over the long run. And throughout the decades, Sonic has built up its own fans, and as a result of those fans is people making fan games like Triple Trouble 16-bit and Sonic and the Fallen Star. They even hired some fans who previously worked on a ROM hack to help out with Sonic Mania. Hell, my channel's whole persona is based on Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, while these casual 2D Sonic games are great, what if someone tried to make something more creepy? Enter Sonic.exe. Now, Sonic.exe, the game, was based on a 2011 creepypasta of the same name. I'm not going to focus on the creepypasta mainly due to the person who originally wrote it being found out. And also since that has been done way too many times on this platform. I instead want to focus on the fan game from MY5T Crimson, I probably butchered that, which I should mention has left its own impact on fan games on the platform. So with that established, let's get into this. We start up the game and hear that iconic Sonic jingle. We get into the character menu and choose Tails. Now, here's the gameplay for this game. It's simple. You press the right arrow key. That's it. That's all the skill you need to put in the game. Excellent. Anyway, we keep walking to the right until we see a bunch of animal courses scattered around the environment. Then the music cuts silent. We walk to the right just a little bit more before we just see Sonic standing there.
Hello. Do you want to play with me?
We go to a stage called You Can't Run, which is just Angel Island Stone, but on fire. We walk to the right until Sonic does whatever you call this, and chases after you.
I will eat your heart. You're too slow. Want to try again?
We head back to the character menu and we see that Tails is dead. Then we proceed to choose Knuckles. We get into the level and we walk to the right. And walk to the right. And walk to the right. And we walk to the right. Eventually Static appears and it appears again and... yeah, I'm starting to notice a bit of a pattern. Blood appears and we keep walking and walking and walk. So honestly, I find this part really hard to explain, so I'll just let you watch it and draw your own conclusion.
You will die at my hands. So many souls to play with. So little time. Would you agree?
Yeah, that just happens. No words for it. Well, we head back to the character select menu and we choose Eggman. I'm sorry, but how Eggman is running makes this a bit hard to take seriously. We go down to many, many staircases as the background gets darker. Eventually, we run into Sonic again. The site plays as usual, but then we see this weird photorealistic image of Sonic.exe. However, it's more cursed than disturbing, in my opinion. Kinda reminds me of the Sonic movie. This happens, and the game also tries and scares you by data mining your computer to find your name.
Ready for round 2.
We get a game over screen and some Japanese text. I will come back to this later. And that was it for Sonic.exe. I lied. What if I told you there's a secret ending? The way you do it is simply, instead, go to the end of each part and walk to the left. I know, super complicated. Each of these parts honestly make me kind of uncomfortable, and it makes me wonder why the rest of the game wasn't like this. In these parts do the entire data mining your computer to find your name thing. In these secret areas, you have to collect black rings, which decreases your ring counts, yes, negative rings, and we finish the game with -3 rings. That Japanese text from earlier appears in English and says the following. There is a way to release ourselves, a spell to attain your souls once more. But we speak it, but when we speak, no sound, we are all deaf. So failure is inevitable, and I regret entering my eternal bet. With the devil inside of me, and immortality versus snow snatching, Gary Cook versus Jing Shinked, ambition is overrated. Now, what does this mean, or what does this have to do with Sonic.exe? No clue. But after this, we get a really creepy and surreal section, which honestly I don't know how to describe. It's the most unnerved I felt playing Sonic.exe. Eventually, the UI disappears, and we get a cheap jump scare, Then we get more Japanese text. This time it says, I was killed and slaughtered with anger. I killed it until all my strength was gone. And yet they die with only pleasure for the devil who reserved me to torture. Now I should have mentioned they used Google Translate to translate this, since I found nothing but this text online. But either way, it sounds like an overdramatic attempt at being scary, which just ends up failing. So that's it for Sonic.exe. While the game itself is a very popular icon when it comes to horror, it honestly hasn't aged well, and it's just kind of hard to take seriously, especially 10-11 years later. Just mediocre.